On December 8th, just over a week from now, all state election disputes, including court challenges, recounts, must be resolved. Then the electors, as you mentioned, meet on the 14th of December. Then fast forward to January 6th, the electors' votes are actually counted by the new Congress that have just been sworn in.
Yeah, that's a very important day, Sean. And it's important for many reasons. It has been attempted before by Democrats in 2017 when Hillary Clinton lost to Trump. Towards the end of the count, Congressman Maxine Waters pleaded for a senator to join her in objection to these counts. She asked, is there any United States senator who will join me in this letter of objection?
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up, Lyndsay, because for most people that they sort of say, okay, well, that's the end of the process. But what you're talking about is this act in the Constitution that lays out how electors cast their ballots and makes it clear that there's a process by which the House and the Senate can actually object to the roll of the electors being called and counted. And so 2017, that did happen.
Yeah, exactly. It was also attempted in 2001 when Al Gore lost to George Bush, and former Congressman Jesse Jackson also couldn't get a senator to sign on. No one would do it. So you had a couple scenarios there where no senator would join into the fight there.
Yeah, it's interesting because the process is such that it requires a House member in the House of Representatives and a senator in the Senate to basically agree and come together and object. Then each of the chambers go back and debate for up to 2 hours each of those objections. That has to be made in writing what the problem was. The Constitution, though, is pretty mum on what happens from there. But there's a vote that occurs if the House member and the senator cite an irregularity in writing, and it goes from there. I mean, that's kind of the big thing. And in 2004, actually, Lyndsay, I served as an elector from Virginia, and John Kerry had lost to George Bush, as you might remember, and congressional Democrats at the time forced a full-fledged debate over the electors in Ohio. And in that case, yes, the House did get a senator, the House member did get a senator to get together, go back to the respective chambers, where they ultimately both rejected the challenge. And so our next guest has actually been very vocal about this very issue. Joining us now is the Congressman from Florida, friend of the show, Matt Gaetz. Congressman, welcome back. Good to see you.
Oh, thanks for having me, and congratulations on all the success of the show.
Well, I appreciate it. I think you were one of the early loyal guests that came on and helped put us on the map as a show, so I appreciate your early and continued support. Congressman, clearly right now, I mean, just being objectively, Joe Biden is on a path to get the requisite number of 270 electoral votes. Newsmax has still not called this race. We're waiting for the president to exhaust his challenges in the states. But I just want to be clear that, I mean, if you look at it objectively, you can say that the number of states that have certified their electors favors Joe Biden getting 270. But you have been quoted in this story that I saw that I think was fascinating in Politico that says how Trump's Hill allies could take one last shot to overturn the election. Nothing is off the table, said Congressman Matt Gaetz. I think this is fascinating. Walk me through what you're thinking, what the strategy is, and how real this is.
Just today, I've talked to Republicans in the House of Representatives, and I've also talked to Republicans in the United States Senate. And there is an interest in looking into these irregularities and presenting them to force a debate in the Congress about whether or not to certify these, or accept, I should say, these states' electors. Every state's electors are individually subject to objection, as you correctly pointed out to top off the show. And if we don't see, I think, some explanation for why in places there is not a match with the number of people who voted and the people who are on the voter rolls, if we see these voter registration anomalies continue, I think it would be worthy of a debate. So if it were to be the case that members of the House and a member of the Senate were to offer that objection, it would require a 2-hour debate about that state's process and about the validity of the electors that they have sent. And I think the nation would survive that, Sean. I think somehow the union would hold if we took the opportunity to isolate the irregularities in Georgia, in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin in particular, and to lay that bare before the nation so that at a minimum we ensure that this type of erosion of election integrity never happens again.
Yeah, it's funny. As I mentioned, in 2004, I was an elector, and I actually was sitting on the House floor as a House staffer at the time. and a member from got up and objected. And I believe it was Carol Moseley Braun from the Senate concurred. So they went back, and for 2 hours they debated this, but it fizzled out. But then it was sort of just they were upset that President Bush had won re-election over John Kerry. You point out there are serious objections over how some of these states have handled it. So can you kind of walk me through? Are there 5, 10, 20 House members, and who are the Senate members that you have been talking to that this is going to come together with? Because I think that's the thing, right? The Constitution makes it clear that you have to have a House member and a Senate member. Would you be one of those members? Are you willing to say tonight that you are one of the members that is willing to be the House member?
Well, on behalf of my constituents in Northwest Florida, I'm keeping all my options open. I'm watching how the legal process unfolds. I am very carefully watching how these state legislative hearings are uncovering voter fraud. There were more examples just today being put out in press releases about trucks that had gone missing with ballots that then may have appeared in Pennsylvania and been illegally counted and cast. And so I think that I don't want to preempt any of my colleagues, and I certainly don't want to scoop any who have reposed trust in me, but I could tell you that these discussions are ongoing. And at least among those of us who are having them, there's not a belief that this is like an attack on democracy, right? The left-wing corporate media has been telling the country that the president's utilization of the legal process and the political process is somehow damaging to America. The reality is stocks are soaring, vaccines are being delivered, America is fine, nothing is being held up, but we do need to isolate these specific events that I think really informed on this election. I mean, Sean, everybody knows that of the people who showed up to vote, Donald Trump won an overwhelming majority. And the farther you got the voter away from an identification, the higher Joe Biden's margins got. And that should concern all Americans.
Yeah, I actually want to get to that in a moment, because I think there's a lot to really break down. And so let me just get through this, though. But is there a senator or a House member that you've talked to so far that has been willing to put their name? Because, again, sort of getting those two pieces together like a Lego, that connect together are the key to this whole thing. So do you know of a single House member that's willing to say that they will be willing to do this?
I'm not scooping anybody, but I know that there are groups of people who are looking at it very closely. Okay.
I'm going to tempt you one step closer, though. Do you know a senator? You don't have to give me their name. It's obvious you're not going there. But is there a senator? Because I think the key is to get these two pieces together. So I get you're not going to give me a name, right? But will you at least tell me, is there a senator?
You want me to point to a state on a map? Would that make it easier for you and the viewer, Sean?
Sure, that's fine. I don't care. You can give me initials. We can play a game. But I'm just trying to figure out how real this is.
Yeah, no, I think that there are senators that, in the discussions I've had, the substance of those discussions has surrounded what issues would be ripened for debate. So if, for example, we objected to Georgia, central to that objection would be the Secretary of State going and entering into a consent decree with Stacey Abrams that was approved by no legislature, but that had the force of law to allow more ballots to be counted without proper identification, that allowed voter registration to occur without a lashing of that actual human's existence to some semblance of reality. So I think that senators, while I've had no senators say they are absolutely 100% certain going to validate an objection that a House member would raise, they are looking at what issues we could ripen with that discussion and what value that would have for the country.
Right. The thing that I love that you pointed out is that they keep talking about Donald Trump undermining the process. He's actually following the process. This is how it's supposed to work. Undermining the process would be saying, like, I'm calling in the army to, just claim martial law and whatever. He's literally following the legal process laid out in the Constitution and state law.
Right, and it's not even unprecedented. As you and Lyndsay pointed out, like, somehow America held together when, in George Bush's defeat of John Kerry, the chambers retired for 2 hours of debate about Ohio's electors. Like, that didn't fundamentally alter and shake America, but you see this from the media. It's the very same media that you had to deal with nose to nose in the White House briefing room. They're always so unfair to the president, and they're eager to, give Joe Biden a cat bath every chance they get. And I think that the American people see through that double standard. I mean, it's like Biden's getting the honeymoon that Trump never got. You guys got the acrimonious divorce and the alimony payments while he's getting the honeymoon.
I'll tell you, after breaking his foot playing with his dog, maybe he should spend more time with cats or something. Congressman, I would love for you if you could please stick around. There's so much to delve into with what you just talked about, and I want to break it down, more claims that you have, and I think that we've got to get to the bottom of this. So please stick around. We'll be
All right, Congressman Matt Gaetz from Florida is back with us now. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks for coming back.
Good to be with you, Lyndsay.
All right. Well, you mentioned this earlier that almost every day it seems like, or every other day, there's more claims of voter fraud that keep coming out. One of the interesting things to me, Sean and I were talking about this earlier, the media and Democrats, specifically, I remember Elizabeth Warren last year raising the flag and with concern for some of these voting machines. Even USA Today had this article before the election, November 2nd, saying, "Will your ballot be safe? Computer experts sound warning on America's voting machines." And there was so much concern out there. But, it didn't seem like that there was that much concern from Republicans. Do you think that they took this concern seriously enough? Why didn't they do that earlier?
You are right to criticize Republicans for not giving close enough attention to the infrastructure of the election process. Take Maricopa County, Arizona, where there was a real problem with the way ballots were fed into machines and then giving confusing red lights and green lights back to the voters. Well, the Republican elected county chair did not even show up to the meeting to validate those voting systems. So critique of Republicans for not doing enough on the front end is accurate. By the way, not in my state of Florida, where when we found the fraud feasors, Governor DeSantis fired them, and then we cleaned up our election system where we had an honest, accurate, thorough result very soon during election night. But when it comes to the concern over these systems, you're right. It did not emanate from Republicans. It was Ron Wyden and Elizabeth Warren saying that we needed to have closer audits of these Dominion voting systems. The good news is that in Georgia, a judge has issued a preservation order over some of those voting systems, and the reason a court would do that would be to hold an evidentiary hearing. For all the lawsuits that have been filed, the Trump campaign hasn't had the opportunity yet to even have an evidentiary hearing because they've been dealing with hearings on the sufficiency of pleadings. So if we get that hearing in Georgia, we may learn a lot more about those systems, the very same systems Elizabeth Warren was questioning.
I'll tell you, you guys also do vote by mail correctly down there to ensure that the voters who they say they are. We Republicans allowed this to happen. The reason that I think the president lost Nevada is because the governor changed the rules and did vote by mail, and it happened in plain sight. And I think Republicans should have been on the ball when it happened because they knew this was going to benefit Biden. I mean, we watched it happen, Congressman, and it kills me. But last block, you talked about some of these abnormalities that occurred on election night. Let me just kind of run through a few of them. In Pennsylvania, poll workers stopped counting at 9 p.m. Why? I don't know. At least I haven't seen anybody actually talk about why that happened. They just didn't show up. They went home. And no one seems to ask the question, like, why did they just randomly go home? Maybe it's legitimate, maybe it's not, but I'd love to at least know. In Wisconsin, let me show you this graph that I saw the president tweet out that shows that this massive surge of votes, 143,379 votes for Joe Biden in Wisconsin at 3:42 a.m. Look at that. That's not even close to any other normal time. And in Arizona, the 143,100 votes that were dumped at 8 p.m. surpasses machine batch processing. An estimated 35,000 votes were automatically embedded into the vote totals for every Democratic candidate running. These things, maybe they can be explained, but so far, no one that I have heard has explained all of these abnormalities, and no one seems to think that it's worth asking why.
Well, these abnormalities all fit within a singular ballot laundering scheme. To launder ballots, you essentially need two things. One, a large universe of ballots that are not directly lashed to a human being that is either asked for them, like you have to do in Florida, or is actually shown up somewhere. So that's the first thing you need. Then the second thing you need is an ability to count a large number of ballots with limited scrutiny and oversight. You see, in Florida, we actually count the mail-in ballots and verify the signatures as they come in. So you're not dealing with 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 at a time in an urban core where you can then throw out the partisan observers and then just do what you want with ballots that are quite literally being willed into existence. So these are not unsolvable problems, but you cannot have just an inordinate number of unaccounted for ballots out there, and then you cannot allow for a period of time for a mass processing of those ballots. Because one of the problems the Trump campaign legal team has had is that once bad ballots are commingled with ballots that were lawfully cast, it's very hard to get judges to unwind that system and invalidate a pool of polluted ballots just because there was nefarious activity with some of those ballots.
Yeah, and we don't have very much time left, but we talked to Claudia Tenney about this yesterday. You had these Democratic governors who are changing the rules when the Constitution says that state legislators are the ones who should be doing that. A lot of the time hurting these board of electors, not giving them the help that they needed for all these extra ballots. Are these governors going to be held accountable?
Well, this brings us full circle because the departure of the law set by the legislature and the enactment of these universal mail-out voting systems could be the very basis of objections raised in the House and the Senate and then debated before the United States Congress before Joe Biden is the president-elect. So that very point, I think, is something we could address, and the sufficiency of the actions of these governors, I think, warrants a great deal more scrutiny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you,
Congressman, thanks for being here. We'll have to have you back soon, but appreciate the insight today.
Newsmax TV is now America's fastest growing cable news channel. We give you the real news you need. So subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, share it with your friends. Newsmax TV streams live on YouTube for free. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.